Is it possible that social media algorithms could make us more loving and kind? Like, could they optimize for that? And I think the answer is yes, with a big asterisk. So if we're going to think this through, I think it's important to first acknowledge that one of the worst turns that social media algorithms took was when they started to optimize for meaningful social engagement. Because it turned out that what made up meaningful social engagement turned out to be conflict with people. Now, of course, that's going to optimize for profits on social media because social media companies want more watch hours, more engagement on platforms. When you're more engaged, you're more likely to click on advertisements, all of that stuff. But the algorithms don't know, are you engaging more because this is a meaningful, beautiful experience? Or are you engaging more because you feel compelled to enter into the conflict with that person who needs to be put in their place? So if we're going to approach this question about can artificial intelligence and machine learning make us more loving, we need to approach it with a lot of humility. Now, of course, if we're going to have artificial intelligence optimize for something, it's going to need good data. And so we want to ask, what would that data be about? Which begs the question, what are the ingredients of quality relationships? What are the ingredients of love? So let me list a few just to get us started. One is quality attention, responsiveness to the other person, good communication skills, valuing the other person, encouragement, grace, or an ability to handle imperfection in the other person, working through conflict constructively. Let me talk about a few of these, starting with the one that worries me most, and that is quality attention. So what does that mean? Quality attention is attention to the other person, where you're truly listening to what they say, where you're not projecting your stereotypes or your assumptions onto them, but you're letting them be a full person in your presence. You're paying attention to them. You can't really get good relationships without that ingredient. And one of the reasons this worries me most is because currently social media companies are optimizing for our attention on their things that have their advertisements running by them. So that's actually sucking up quality attention that could go to people in our lives. It could go toward creating loving friendships and loving relationships. And instead, that attention is getting sucked into this addictive machine. And in some ways, I think this is leading to attention starvation, where a lot of people don't have people in their lives who give them quality attention. They're only getting sort of the dregs of people's attention to think about their issues or to actually look at them and see them as a person. And I think that attention starvation is partially what's making us sick. Now, I'm an economist, so one way that I think about things is in terms of supply and demand. And if we think about the supply and the demand of attention, I think we have a huge demand for quality attention and a very short supply of it, because people's attention is sucked up on social media spaces. So people are starving for attention, they're seeking that out, and they're not finding it. And of course, when people are starving for attention, sometimes they get really bad at seeking that attention. They do outrageous things. They'll seek negative attention rather than no attention at all. Or if you've been with someone who is so starving for attention that they can't have a two-way conversation, that person is not fun to be with, so you avoid them, and that sort of feeds into their attention starvation. Okay, so if I'm going to complain, what could we actually do to make social media organizations and social media algorithms work in our favor for increasing the amount of quality attention sort of spread throughout the population? And here I'm talking about attention from one person to another that is fulfilling to both parties. Well, of course, one of the themes is that the algorithm cannot optimize for this unless it knows what type of attention is good and what type of attention is not good. And one of the problems we have right now is that these algorithms have very crude types of data. Like an upvote. What does that mean? Does that mean you agree with it? Does that mean you thought it was thoughtful? You thought it was entertaining? You just want to support the person? Does that mean this is a reciprocal thing? You're hoping for an upvote from them? There are so many different realities behind the one piece of data, the upvote, that it's just too blunt of a tool to actually work to optimize real things like quality attention. So I think this is one theme when I'm thinking through, can we make people more loving through social media, is we would need data on when did you actually leave an interaction feeling fulfilled, feeling like you were seen and valued as a person. When was that the kind of attention you got versus when was the attention in this conversation sort of two people talking past each other in each other's presence? Those are very different things. And we would need the data that's being fed to the algorithms to very much distinguish between those. The other issue here is it would need to be real attention. Right now, I think because people are starving for attention, social media is figuring out ways of feeding fake attention. Like, how many views do you get on a video? Is that real attention? Well, if someone watches 5 seconds of a video, that's not real attention, but for someone who's sort of watching their social media accounts, they might feel like, oh, people saw it, people understood me. Or how many likes did I get on that? How many views did I get on that article I posted? So I think right now social media is bartering in fake attention that in some ways feels like real attention. It's being used to satisfy people's hunger for attention, but it's leaving people not fulfilled. So I think having good data being fed into the system that captures, yes, this was true attention from one person to another, that's going to be the key. So let me stop here and just give you a quick and dirty list of the things I think the algorithms would need to do in order to make us more loving. Well, one is they'd need to take in quality feedback from people about the real thing it's trying to optimize. Then it would need to try to incentivize the positive quality version of attention. Then it would need to disincentivize conflict. And finally, I think it would need to incentivize the development of skills to work through conflict, to smooth over conflict, and just the general relationship skills that are required when you're dealing with people who are always going to be messy and surprising and unexpected. Now, because that list includes conflict, I wanted to talk a little bit about loving relationships and small amounts of conflict. Now, I talk about large amounts of conflict and polarization and all of that in other videos, so I won't cover that here. But one thing I think is going on that is driving people apart and that is stopping relationships from forming is the fact that being in relationship with people requires being able to handle their bad moods or their imperfect social skills, where maybe they don't pick up on the thing you want to pick up on, or maybe their face cringes a little bit, which might mean something or maybe not when you say something, or just sort of like there's these small social allergens that are always going to be there when people interact. And to some degree, I worry that social media is making us allergic to those. Specifically, social media gives us a way that we can sort of click away and remove ourselves from the situation anytime something uncomfortable happens. Whereas in real, in-person, face-to-face relationships, we have to stay in the room when something uncomfortable happens. And that forces us to sort of work through it, to deal emotionally with ourselves as we have to work through the small social allergens, to navigate what do I let go and what do I address with someone. All of that kind of stuff is necessary for navigating relationship. And I think social media is getting us too used to not having to deal with the small social allergens. And that is lowering our ability to handle those, and therefore we're sort of withdrawing. Now, how could social media actually reverse this trend? And to some degree, I think it would need to reward us for persisting through the uncomfortable parts of relationships, like showing up again the next day for a conversation with a person, even when they were kind of grouchy and unresponsive the previous day. I mean, people have moods. Dealing with people's moods is part of just being in a relationship. And I think it would need to incentivize us persisting through to the point where, we realize we can handle a few social allergens. So that's another little piece of what we would need to happen if we wanted social media to make us more loving. Now, I want to talk a little bit about why I think this is hard to do in a social media space. And that is specifically, it's hard to actually get good data about the quality of a relationship, because to get that data, it sort of interrupts the flow. Right now, we have the like button is sort of built into what we're doing socially, and it doesn't take that much time, and you don't have to think about the costs and benefits of it. So it's way more instinctive to learn to use the like button. But to learn what sort of interaction was actually good and meaningful, and what sort of interaction was me working through conflict in a constructive way, all of that requires a lot more thought. And it's way hard to get people to give quality feedback in any setting, but especially when that quality feedback is complex and might depend on your mood. I mean, I think it's going to be hard to get people to give really good feedback. Like, what's the time frame? Do you ask people every time they have an interaction, was that the type of interaction you'd want to repeat? That one I could actually see working fairly well, because I could see in some ways social media companies matching up a couple of people for a conversation, and at the end you're like, I really liked what happened there. I would like another conversation like that. And if you know that sort of rating that would make it more likely to repeat the experience, I think people would do that. But if there's a longer term relationship you want people to build, and I think you would have to incentivize not just one-on relationships, but relationships that persisted, then the relationship is going to have ups and downs, and you don't want the negative rating that the person gives when both people are in a bad mood and they just didn't get along. You don't want that to have too much weight. What you want to have weight is, what do they do to get past that? And that's just a really hard, complicated thing to incentivize. So these are just some initial thoughts on the question of, can social media make us more loving? I think it's possible. I think it's worthwhile, but I think it is going to be hard to achieve.